Dateline, the Middle East, news briefs, analysis, and commentary, April 4th through 17, 2016. This is Dr. Steve Carroll. Breaking news. Dateline, Golan Heights, Israel. The Israeli cabinet met this morning, Israeli time, to have its weekly session on the Golan Heights, and for good reason. Prime Minister Netanyahu has declared that Israel will never give up the Golan Heights and has announced that he will visit Moscow this Thursday, April 21st, to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin and to launch the most important battle of his political career and one of Israel's most decisive contests in the last 10 years, the battle over the future of the Golan Heights. Thanks to DEPCA Files intelligence sources, in an exclusive report released this morning, Israel's top political leaders and military commanders were stunned and shocked last weekend when they found out that U.S. President Barack Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin have agreed to support the return of the entire Golan Heights to Syria. The two presidents gave their top diplomats, Secretary of State John Kerry, he of the Iran deal, and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, the green light to include such a clause in a proposal being drafted at the Geneva Conference on ending the 5-year-long Syrian civil war. Ironically, just last night, I was speaking publicly to a group of about a dozen or more they asked, what can Obama do? Isn't he leaving office? I says, as an executive, he has many things he can do, and here he's doing something that was unexpected by Israel. In 1981, during the tenure of then Prime Minister Menachem Begin, Israel passed a law defining the Golan Heights as a territory under Israeli sovereignty. However, it did not state that the area belongs to Israel. Perhaps that was Israel's first mistake. While Israel was preparing for a diplomatic battle over the future of Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, Obama and Putin decided to deal a diplomatic blow to Israel and to Netanyahu's government on an unexpected issue, the Golan Heights. It is part of an endeavor by the two superpowers to use their diplomatic and military cooperation regarding Syria to impose agreements on neighboring countries such as Israel, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. For example, Washington and Moscow are trying to impose an agreement regarding the granting of independence to Syrian Kurds despite Turkey's adamant refusal and objection to such a move because Turkey fears the spillover of an independent Syrian Kurdish area on the Kurds of Turkey. The two presidents are also pressuring Saudi Arabia and Jordan to accept the continuation of Syrian President Bashar Assad's rule, at least for the immediate future. Sources report that just like the other diplomatic or military steps initiated by Obama and Putin in Syria, such as those for Assad's eventual removal from power, the two powers see a resolution of the Golan Heights issue as a gradual process that may take a long time, perhaps even years, but as far as they are concerned, Israel will have to withdraw from the Golan Heights at the end of that process, meaning the Israeli border goes back to the 1949 armistice line at the base of the Golan Heights, several feet from the edge of the Sea of Galilee, also known as Lake Kinneret. It should be noted that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not traveling to Washington to discuss the Golan Heights issue with Obama. We all can understand why that is. The frequent trips by the Israeli Prime Minister, senior officials, and top IDF military brass to Moscow in recent months shows where the winds are blowing in the Middle East and who is the top power of the big powers in the Middle East, and it isn't the United States. However, Moscow is not Washington, and Israel has no lobby in the Russian capital defending its interests. It should be made very clear that the frequent trips by senior Israeli officials to Russia have not created an Israeli policy that can influence Putin or other senior members of the Russian leadership. Putin has made occasional concessions to Israel on matters of minimal strategic importance, but on diplomatic and military steps regarding Syria and Iran, he has shown little consideration of Israel's position. It should also be noted that there has been no basis for the enthusiasm over the Russian intervention in Syria shown by Netanyahu, Israeli ministers, and senior IDF officials. All of the calls by a number of Russian experts, mainly those for extreme caution in ties with Putin, have fallen on deaf ears among the political leadership in Jerusalem and the IDF command in Tel Aviv. So to continue the news that Washington and Moscow are going to impose a settlement on Israel to leave the Golan Heights, we must note that amid these developments, three regional countries are very pleased by what Washington and Moscow have agreed to in demanding the Israeli withdrawal sooner or later from the Golan Heights. Syrian President Assad, the Iranian Islamic leadership in Tehran, and the Hezbollah terrorist leader Hassan Nasrallah, the de facto ruler of neighboring Lebanon. Now, they don't even need to risk a military confrontation with Israel. They might lose too much over the Golan Heights because guess what? President Obama and President Putin have essentially agreed to do the dirty work for them. This commentator adds that just as in September of 1938, strong powers working with appeasement-minded and concessionary powers forced a solution about a strategic frontier area against the small national interests of that tiny country that possessed the Sudetenland, that country named Czechoslovakia. Back in 1938, it was the strong powers of Nazi Germany, and fascist Italy, the appeasement powers of the United Kingdom and France, and Czechoslovakia was forced to pay. Now we see perhaps one less on each side, but we have the strong power in the Middle East, Russia. We have the concessionary, appeasement-minded Obama administration forcing Israel to give up this strategically important territory, less than 500 square miles, that it gained in a defensive war after Syria had made war from that position for 19 years. They are forcing Israel to do this. What is needed to know, and I do cover this in my new book, Understanding the Volatile and Dangerous Middle East, that the British, which possessed the Golan Heights as part of the Mandate of Palestine, all of which was assigned as a Jewish national home, and in the mandatory documents it states Britain is not allowed to give any of that away. Well, why does Britain have to listen to the League of Nations? It was controlling the League of Nations with 6 votes. It unilaterally detached the Golan Heights from mandatory Palestine, which was to become the Jewish state, and gave it to France. And from France, it became part of Syria. Well, we have to look at history. To this day, Syria objects that France detached a piece of Syria and gave it to Turkey. That area called Alexandretta, that area called Hatay. Well, if Syria objects to that and wants it back, where is the outcry that not only did Israel get this in a legal war of self-defense, and you don't reward aggressors, you punish them, but they need to bring up that issue as well. So now you ask, and here I have to differ with Yoni. He says Israel should leave the UN. This would play right into the hands of Israel's enemies, because then they would have the easiest time claiming it is an outlaw state. And how can they force this? Well, number one, can the Security Council declare a threat to peace? Yes. Will Obama veto it? Probably not. Will they declare Israel a threat to peace because it refuses to give back Golan? Yes. Could they then call for action under Article 7? And will there be volunteer countries to willingly send troops, tanks, material to the bordering areas, and let's go for the big onslaught on Israel? Yes, that could be done. Would they pay a horrid price? Yes, because as I said in my talk last night, Israel will use nuclear weapons to defend itself, and under international law, that is completely legitimate. It doesn't have to wait for Iran to strike it if there is a threat to the very survival of Israel. And such a massing of volunteers, I have no doubt, North Korea, Cuba, Iran, a lot of Arab states, they'll all send troops. We're going to enforce the will of the UN. So we cannot take these things for granted that what can they do? They can do. Israel is quite small. Does Israel have enough munitions to fight a 30-day war, a 60-day war? Will there be embargoes? These are all unknowns. We hoped that the Israeli leadership has learned what it must do and prepare for. But meanwhile, for those who think, oh, the Obama administration is on its last legs and can't do anything, I beg to differ not only on this issue, which has now manifested itself, but on much more to come in the next some 200 days. Remember, people don't know their government workings. Who gets elected on November 8th? The next president. Who's president on November 9th? Barack Obama. On November 10th, Barack Obama. Until high noon of January 20th, 2017, it is Barack Obama, and he has many legal executive powers and things he can do.